And I respect the work that you guys have been doing, especially
Thank you.
presenting yourselves as kind of just trying to build like a place where people should start from, right? And I think what's difficult. Assalamu alaikum, Laura. I think what's
Alaikum
difficult
assalam.
is as we like we're all isolated, right? And I think that's the difficulty within our movement. So these attacks are able to happen upon us, right? Whether it be me in Oakland, right, someone else in Detroit, someone in Canada, Pal Action in London. It's because we as a movement and as a people, we're so isolated. Some of us have assimilated into NGO power. Some of us have assimilated into like professionalism in like corporate America and like kind of like kind of become an extension of white supremacy within our own social circles. And then some of us are still like just out here, like lone wolves. So I think like if we can find a way to tether ourselves to each other, these attacks they'll have no merit.
This episode's gonna be a banger. I can already tell.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about building community, I think, at the heart of it. And I think loneliness is a big thing when you're in this struggle. It's a really big thing. I mean, think about just there's so many layers to the loneliness too. When you're a Palestinian and you're not on the land, there's a there's a loneliness just in that mere fact alone. And then you're trying to struggle from the heart of empire, and you wake up every day faced with, I have to go out, I have to work, I have to earn, I have to survive, I have to support my family. But at the same time, you can't compromise on principle. So I have to do what I can to also struggle to make this world better and to ensure that this colonial violence that we're seeing, this nasty, nasty violence that has no boundaries, that is not restricted by anything, that is not limited by any sort of morality. It's just endless. That you restrain it in some way, that you end it, that you make sure that people know that you were against it, that you try to stop it, because at the end of the day, it's human beings, it's your family, it's your friends, it's your community. It's very heavy and it's very isolating, but it's also, there's really no space to even complain about it, because how dare you? You are in the peak of privilege because you have a home, you have safety, sort of, you have food. When people are being deprived of safety and food, and their bodies are literally coming face to face with this nonstop killing machine. So there's a lot of layers to it. But I definitely feel it, and thank you for pointing it out and starting the episode with such a thoughtful reflection.
Alhamdulillah, thank you for your contributions. Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah. And I think it's super important that you're based in Oakland. The historical relevance of Oakland towards the struggle of liberation, the home of the Black Panther Party. In a way, you're an ideological heir to the Black Panther Party, right? You're keeping the same mission alive, which is liberation. That's a place that's known for community, and it's special, right? That's where you're based.
Yeah, I think the way you phrase the ideological air, I think it's so important because we all are, right? We all are if we want to resist against empire, right? When we look at like the radical new African tradition of liberation, revolution. We see the writings of George Jackson. We just finished Black August. As a Palestinian living within the belly of the beast, there's a way to engage. There's a way to engage in uh, and I say this word like loosely, in indirect action, right? Indirect action against empire could come in many different ways, right? And I think we've seen throughout history here successful resistance, and it was all rooted in community, as Lara mentioned. It's the community. The Black Panther community started out as a community, right? Free breakfast program, the crosswalk, make sure the crosswalk was safe. And this is why Gaza was decimated the way it was, is because despite military occupation. I'm from Shujaiya. My dad was
Oh my
born.
God.
My dad was born in Gaza. My dad was 4 years old when '67 happened, right? And then I came across this brilliant writer. Her name is Hanan Wrights, and she talks about how the homes in Gaza, what they represent, and the reason why the Zionist state is so, just hawkish on destroying every single home is because every single home resembles a physical manifestation of a community, right? Despite occupation, right? Despite militarism, right? Despite, counting the calories, a genocide through food, through just all different ways that have been medical genocide, right? We can put all these, terms in front of it. Palestinians have been experiencing it for since 1917, right? It's not new to us, but the modernization of the genocide and just the brazen character of the Zionist state to just on live feeds, on social media, on live TV, like airstrike children, airstrike journalists, mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters has really, I think, shocked the world and shocked the moral conscience and the fabric of society globally. And I think people are just trying to figure out how to respond.
Shujaiya is the heart of Gaza.
Man, I would say that Gaza is like the heart of Palestine. I feel
Yeah.
like,
And
yeah,
Shujaiya is the heart of Gaza. Whenever I meet people from Gaza, they always say Shujaiya is its own thing. They have their own dialect, they have their own style and way of doing things, and they really represent the heart of Gaza. One of my favorite people from Gaza, Mohammed Al Hilo, the Palestinian journalist, is also from Shujaiya. And yeah, so thank you also for sharing that. But we're obviously here to talk about the lawsuits, the DOJ, blah blah blah, all of this stuff. But before we get into that, I think it's so much more interesting to begin with you and your story, your family story, and then eventually the incident that happened at your cafe. So you mentioned you're from Shujaiya, your family's originally from Gaza, or were they Nakba survivors that are originally from 48 lands? And can you tell us a little bit about their story?
yeah. So I would say my grandmother, from my father's side, was born in Haifa, and my great grandfather, from my father's side, ironically, was born in Gaza. So half of my family is originally from Gaza, and the other half is from Haifa, and that they ended up moving to Gaza after 1948. The reason why they chose Gaza was because we had family in Gaza, so it made sense for them to go somewhere that was more familiar. Um, and I would say that our stories are very similar, right? The stories of our families and the stories of dispossession and just ethnic cleansing that we've experienced. And I think the beautiful thing about like just like having this be a part of our journey is that despite the similarities, right? There's also a lot of differences. I think those differences kind of inform us on how we fit into the larger story of Palestinian liberation.
And have you always been in the US? Or did your
Yeah,
family
so
have a
I'm not
protracted
I'm not
displacement
the best.
story across many
I'm not,
countries?
yeah, I'm not the best about like talking about myself. So I keep trying
You're
to pass
good,
it back
bro.
to you guys so I can
No,
learn
you're
more about
good.
you. Like you're from Gaza. I don't even know what town you're from yet. So
My family's from Zaytun and Ramal, but we're original Gaza,
that's
except
beautiful.
for my great grandmother from my mother's side, who was from Jaffa and went to Gaza when she got married. So I've shared it before in the pod. We don't have the sort of typical Nakba experience from 1948. All of our stories of displacement came from after 1948 because, as you know, it's an ongoing Nakba. So
Sure.
Palestinians have been forcibly removed from their lands at a number of times in our history, and it's a continual process of Zionist colonization of our land. But in 1948, we lost a lot of farmland because our lands were in the areas which were taken forcibly by the Zionists at that time. So it's crazy to see how people who share the same origin, end up in all corners of the world,
Mhm.
and they keep the connection to Gaza still so alive in their hearts. Like, we didn't have to do that, but here you are, several generations later, but still knowing exactly which neighborhood in Gaza you're from, and dedicating your life still to this cause. And I think that is really just a reflection of the Palestinian spirit and the refusal to lay down and die, or to accept what has been done to you. As that's what they want us to accept it, they want us to lay down and die, they want us to forget our origins, take $5,000, go move to another country so that they can turn our land into some sort of a economic development scheme for billionaires. But if there's even one single person left in Gaza, they'll never succeed with that plan, right? And if there's not even one single person left in Gaza, but there's one single Palestinian left somewhere else in the world, we'll continue to resist that from the outside. And I think
That's beautiful.
people sort of fail to factor this into account when they are discussing these plans. Tony Blair Institute is brought on as a consultant for this post-war Gaza, and all of this stuff that you're reading about, the Trump so-called Riviera plan and Netanyahu's Gaza 2025 plan and all these things. And the one thing that they're failing to factor in is the Palestinian will to remain on their land and their connection to their land, and the fact that the land is our identity. Like, what are you guys even talking about?
I'm from Brooklyn, which is why I don't live in occupied Palestine.
I've been to Brooklyn. Brooklyn's nice. You're based in Brooklyn?
No, that's just where I'm from.
Okay, sweet.
It was just a little joke. I'm a comedian. Sometimes I try and interject humor. I don't know if it worked that time, but
He was like, "Oh, you're from Brooklyn. Oh, cool." You're like, "No, it's not." That wasn't
I know, but I think it's very upright and of great moral character to refuse to live in occupied Palestine when you're given like the rites of passage and you're given just your essentially money is thrown on you and opportunities and job and so forth to go there and create a new reality that is completely disconnected from any type of connection to that land. And I think that's a it's funny that you actually say you're from Brooklyn because that's a lot of settlers there. They'll be from Europe, from European lands, from across the United States, right? And they'll be flown over, put in occupied Palestine, and they are programmed to believe that this is their land when they have no connection to the soil, right? They wouldn't even know how to fertilize the land. They wouldn't know how to nourish the land, how to grow the land. They wouldn't know how to build community in the land. They wouldn't all these things that are so that make up actually ironically the essence of Palestinian culture, right? The community, the love, the nourishment, right? The provision, right? The prayers, the spirituality. They they are thinking that they're dispossessing the land of that, but they're not dispossessing the land of that. They themselves are dispossessed of it. So when they come to the land, they don't experience it. They just experience what they come with, which is violence, genocide, right, rape, ethnic cleansing. That's all because that's what they're coming with. They're not coming with, the essence of what we all embody.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for saying that. And my biggest flex is that I actually never went on birthright. Like, even when they offered me a free trip, I was like, you guys are weird. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way. Like, I grew up in LA, right? I was born in New York. I grew up in LA. Like, if the thing is free, you're the product. Dude, I got a vibe check on Israelis and I was like, you people are awful. I didn't need to go over there to have this awakening, right? I have a specific story. I don't know if you know or heard it, you probably haven't, but I was tortured by Israelis in college in Santa Barbara. I was like tied up and black bagged, and they put us in a room for hours, etc. It's the stuff that we see that they do to Palestinians all the time. And that's actually what the guy, so there were two Israeli guys who were in the pledge class tied up with us, and then
You
8
should probably
American
mention
guys.
this was part of a fraternity hazing thing, because without context, I think it sounds like you were just maybe kidnapped off
Did
the
I not
street.
say that?
No, you
No,
I'm
didn't.
so sorry.
I
I'm
was.
so, I'm so sorry. It was a part of a fraternity hazing thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there were 8 American guys and then 2 guys who had served in the occupation army, and they were tied up with us the whole time. And they were like laughing and joking because they admitted to me, they were like, this is what we used to do to Palestinians all the time. And we've seen in the last 2 years, obviously way worse happens to Palestinians. But yeah, I got a slice of what they experience. And so that's what was like a part of my awakening. And I didn't need to go over there to have this huge epiphany.
Yeah, I'm sorry you had to experience that, and I think,
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
and I think, as you, what's powerful is the awakening, right? And I think it's like whatever you choose to continue doing, as long as you continue speaking truth to power, you know what I mean. I think that's what will keep you grounded. But I'm sorry you had to go through that, and I think what's kind of something that I hear in your story is kind of like the joy that these people experience through inflicting violence, um, not upon you, but upon the Palestinians, right? That this triggered a memory in them. They're like, oh my God, we used to do these all the time to these people that were defenseless. It was always a imbalance of power, and I think that becoming that like drunk off of power and becoming that arrogant there kind of becomes laughable. So it's kind of it's ironic that they experience laughter through that. Kind of tells you what kind of people they are. It circles back to what they bring into the land. They brought it here in Santa Barbara as well. So whether it's Santa Barbara or whether it's Palestine, it's nothing but violence, genocide, and some weak, some like sick joke to them.
I always think about what they do to the land. Leave aside what they do to Palestinians. Look at what they've done to the land. It's the clearest indication that they have no connection to the land. They hate the land. They don't forget about connection. They don't even like the land. You look at the thousands and thousands of tons of just toxic waste of nuclear bomb equivalents. Before the genocide, Michael and I would regularly report on their usage of skunk water in occupied Jerusalem, right? They would just spray the land with chemicals that smelled like, rotting garbage. And I sat there thinking to myself, I'm like, this is not something that a Palestinian would ever do or think about, because we like the land. We love the land. The land is us. We are the land. And the reason that they attack the land is precisely because the land is us and we are the land. So in order to kill us, in order to dispossess us of the land, it's like a two-way process. You have to like remove us from the land and remove the land from us, right? By weakening the land, by killing the land, by rendering it no longer fertile, no longer able to be cultivated in order to feed the people who are on the land, right? So that Palestinians in Gaza can't grow their own food. Not only are they, deprived of aid, which is essential to survival in a context of a 17-year-long siege and a 56-year-long occupation and, decades and decades of colonialism, but also the land itself is rendered toxic intentionally so that it can no longer feed us. And yet you have still heard these incredible stories of survival of Palestinians planting, for example, different types of greens that grow quickly and are very nourishing, and using that to feed their communities as a means of resistance to this genocide, right? And adapting and finding creative new ways to survive. So
Yeah.
I always think about what they do to the land, and it's it's a really, it's to me, it's just the evidence that everything that they say, oh, we're indigenous, oh, we're the ones from here, oh, this is, it's like, throw it all away. What do you do to the land? That's the only test that we need to, assess who you are in this story.
So Layla Haddad, she's from Gaza and author of the Gaza Kitchen. And early on to this genocide, something that we don't really see anymore, and goes back to the land. Palestinians were rebuilding their gardens, right? And we had, the farmers growing strawberries again, right? And this is January 2024, under a rain of airstrikes and a rain of missiles. People were growing their tomatoes. People were growing their foods too, because there was like there was hope, right? There was a desire to remain steadfast, to persevere through the adversity, to have sabr, and to be an active agent of change. And I can't help but just see now, with what we're seeing happen in the north and everyone being pushed out slowly and slowly, that we're seeing even these glimpses of nourishment and these glimpses of rebuilding the land and connecting back to the soil. And the stories of these farmers, they've now just become an archive. The farmer has become a martyr, right? The crops are now his crops in Jannah, and it's almost like it's very difficult. It makes me very emotional because you can't help but be pleased about the peace that they're experiencing, but it came at what cost? And not to get religious or anything, but this everything in this world is not worth the one innocent soul to whatever deity you want to, deity, whatever you want to worship. But as a Muslim, like we believe, and as Muslims, we believe that, one innocent soul of mankind is worth more than everything in this earth collapsed into each other.
Yeah. Feel free to get religious. We respect Islam on this podcast.
No, I mean, I think it's important that we understand the perspective of Palestinians that are living in Palestine and that are fighting, right? And that will to fight doesn't come because they've named colonialism or they've named genocide or they've named white supremacy and they've studied up on Marx and all these different authors. It comes because it's within their fitrah, right? It's within themselves, right? And that fitrah is tethered to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I believe that the people that are living in Gaza right now have a connection, a straight connection to Allah, a straight connection to not too far. One of the gates of heavens is on top of Al-Aqsa. That's where one of the 7 gates of heavens will open up. They have a connection directly to that gate. And even throughout like hadith, right, through Islamic scripture, it talks about the people that live in Gaza and in Ascalon and how integral they'll be not only to the spirit of Islam, but to the lifeblood of the ummah. And turning our backs on these people is essentially turning our backs on Allah, turning our backs on a commandment to remain steadfast and to turn to Him and to turn to each other during these moments. And it's very unfortunate that that we've seen like certain world leaders allow Islam to be used as a kind of like a silencing or a deafening of this genocide, right? And then you have these quote unquote Muslim scholars that live in America and throughout the world that will mention Gaza, will mention, oh, keep the Palestinians in your dua, but won't mention why, won't mention how they're being killed, won't mention the onslaught, the suffering,
won't mention who's killing them. Like they're doing the same cover up that the Western media is doing in terms of complicity with this genocide. And it's crazy to see the same techniques of whitewashing, covering up, denying, erasing, the perpetrator from the entire story. And it just becomes this, autonomous phenomenon that Palestinians in Gaza are dying. So just keep them in your prayers, but let's not talk about it for too long, right? Because, you don't want to get political. And of course, there's a lot to be said about that version of Islam that is presented to people, whether it's in the West or even in the Arab world or the Islamic world at large. It is a version of the faith that renders people, I think, robots. It strips Islam of its essence of justice. And that's what Islam is. Islam is not just bodily movements 5 times a day and prostration without principle or morality or an understanding of the value and dignity of the human being. You were mentioning the belief that when you save a life, you save all of humanity. And when you take a life, it's like you take the life of all of humanity. And this is an integral belief in Islam, but also I think reflects the innate value of the human being. The human being was created dignified. And I think it's part of why it's so difficult to see what's happening, because it's an attempt to strip Palestinians of their dignity, and they refuse to be stripped of their dignity. Like, you can do anything to them, but strip them of their dignity. Israel has tried to kill Palestinians in every single way possible. Like, they have burned them to death. They have starved them to death. They have dismembered them in every which way. They have shredded their limbs. Like, there has been no way of torture that has not been inflicted on the Palestinian people in the last 2 years in high definition and streamed across the entire globe. But Palestinians refuse to be stripped of their dignity. You can't take that away from them. And I think that is something which, again, deeply disturbs the colonizer, deeply disturbs them, because they know they'll never fit. The dignity comes from a place of knowing who you are. We know who we are. We know we belong. They don't have it because they don't know who they are, and as a result, they will never belong, right? So I think, there's a lot to be said about the psychology of it all, and how you find power even in places of attempts to strip you of that power. I think a lot about that picture. You remember that picture of the Palestinian man who was being tortured, and the Israeli soldier was standing on top of him, sort of, and the Palestinian man was shackled to a chair, and he had like a nail driven through his knee that we could see, and his eyes were piercing the eyes of the Israeli soldier, who was like slouched and like had very poor posture, and the Palestinian man was sitting upright and looking at him in the face, just dead on. And when that picture was published, so much of the analysis was about the dignity of the Palestinian man in that moment, because it's something that is so obvious, so visible, so impossible to take from him in that moment. Despite the fact that they took his clothes, despite the fact that he was being tortured, despite the fact that he was in a tremendous amount of pain, they couldn't take his dignity away from him. That's something I think of when I think of the Palestinian people, and especially the Palestinian people in Gaza.
And speaking of people who don't belong, let's talk about the provocateur who came into your cafe. And then,
actually, before we talk about the provocateur, can you tell us about the cafe itself? Like, you opened it in September 2023.
Yeah.
Talk about how, a month later, the accelerated genocide begins, and how you turned the cafe into a community space before we get to the story of the provocateur. Because I think that context of what the cafe means to the community, I think, is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. So I would say around November of 2022, me and my close friend, my brother, my Sadiqi, right, who I'm building this cafe with, we had returned from a trip from overseas. We not in Palestine, but we had come back, and there was a strong desire to build and connect and tether Palestine to what we're doing here in Oakland in particular. I had gone back a few times, and I had built built with people that were living in Al Arub refugee camp in Beit Lahem. I stayed with a close friend named Nabila Ra'i, who was the former artistic director of the Freedom Theater. Um, and my educational background was in theater and linguistics. So there was a passion on putting on these stories here in California, in the Bay Area, wherever. And we had put on a play called The Siege that Nabil had written. It was about the siege of the Church of Nativity in 2002, where he was there, and his close friend Zakaria Zubaydah was also there. And so the play is about this particular experience, and there was a strong desire to continue this type of, I would call it a cultural exchange of some sort, right? Where we learn about these rich stories, Palestinian history, in a way that is presented to a foreign audience through the Palestinian, right? It's not being presented through a filter of whiteness or through a filter of like Zionism, but right through, Nabil was actually here in Stanford. We did a production in Stanford, and so there's a strong desire to keep this type of fluidity happening, right? So we started something called Jerusalem Boxing Club, and Jerusalem Boxing Club was kind of gonna act as an organization, as a company that would go to, whether it be Al Arub refugee camp, Dehesha refugee camp, Aida refugee camp, and then we would put on these boxing clinics. We would put on graffiti clinics, theater workshops, and we would work with the kids in the refugee camps to provide them outlets to kind of ease the suffering that they're going through, or provide them with different creative ways to really sustain and build themselves. We really had a lot of strong ideas around kind of curating material that is produced in these camps, and then sold in the United States, and everything goes back to these individuals. And we had every desire to set up that type of infrastructure. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go to Palestine, and kind of that passion, that initial first time, it was almost going to fizzle out. But then I said, this is such a brilliant way to like really engage your people. So let's focus on engaging our people here. So we offered Jerusalem boxing, the boxing portion, to Muslim women here in Oakland, California, and we built it around trauma-informed self-defense, and that was to give Muslim women the same skills and the same talents that I, as a man, was able to get through my 17 years of Muay Thai, my years of boxing. Right, Muslim women don't have this experience because they either wear the hijab, or they have a cultural like aversion to these spaces, or it just doesn't fit within like their idea of like what it means to be a woman in a gym, right? Patriarchy is oozing. I don't know if you've ever been to a fight gym, but they're not very, like they're not the best place for women to come and learn. So we wanted to provide a place that is completely empty of the male gaze, empty of any patriarchal imposition, and allow these women to get together and build themselves up. The coach was a renowned boxing coach and a former amateur boxer from Hayward, California, Virgil's gym. Virgil is the coach of Andre Ward, champion boxer, Amir Khan, Andre Berto. So comes from a very, very this is a very extensively robust program, right? So and then at the time I'm working in tech at the time, and I'm working 2 jobs, just because I'm like, fuck it, it's COVID, like I might as well figure out a way to like try to stack up some money.
I just found out about job stacking 2 days ago, and now I met my first job stacker. Like this, it's so funny that you say this, that you had multiple jobs during COVID. I didn't even yeah.
It was kind of easy to do in tech. I wasn't the only one doing it. Actually, one of my homies put me onto it. So I was doing that, and then it was really to fund the boxing club. And then I was like, man, this is getting tired, because Ramadan had come around. And this was in, I believe in 2023, right? This is, I believe, April or March, around that time. And I told myself, I need to quit one of these jobs. And then as I'm quitting one of these jobs, I'd say I need to figure out a way to sustain the program. So I was like, okay, let me build like a fight club cafe to support a boxing club, right? And I said that'd be kind of like, it's the same. So we kind of sat down. We said, okay, Jerusalem Boxing Club Cafe. They're like, that sounds mad corny. That sounds really strange. So we scrapped that idea and we just called it Jerusalem Coffee House. March of 2023, I signed a lease and I have every intention to open up in May. We don't open up in May. I have every intention to open up in June, and then July, and then August, and then September comes around, and then I have a friend who's a jazz musician, and he's in town. He's like, hey, I can do like an album release at this cafe that you haven't opened yet. Do you need help to open it? Like, do you want me to? I was like, nah, man, I just keep running into these issues. I was running into the health inspector issues. I was running into building permits. And it could be something as simple as like the trim was missing on like the edge of my faucet. So she delayed me like 2 weeks of opening. Every time she would find something, I would get delayed like 2-3 weeks, right? So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he only swears by one thing, which is time, right? Wal asr. So I kind of like, at the time, I didn't like take it for anything. I just said, right now is not the right time. Right now is not the right time. September 17th, we do a soft open because we want to just like engage the community, say hi to everyone, show everybody what we've been building. And then we do that soft open. The health inspector comes the next day. And the health inspectors are like, you shouldn't be open right now because you're not permitted to open. We're like, oh, we weren't open. We just had a little like event. We had like a little private party. And then lo and behold, subhanAllah, we open up the week of October 7th. And the reason why I mention, time and is because I signed that lease in March of 2023. And my intention was to open up in April, right? My intention was to open up in May, in June, in July. But every delay is a delay of Allah. And that delay, it kind of forced me to accept the circumstance in which I'm going to be working in. That this is a huge amana, a big responsibility, a responsibility towards your community here locally, and a responsibility to the people that brought you here, right? Your history, your lineage, what brought you to Jerusalem Coffee House, what brought you to Jerusalem Boxing Club, what brought you to the theater in Stanford, what brought you to Al Arub, what brought you to Ida, what brought you to, Janine. Like this was the reminder. And I'm grateful that now I'm in a position that I have to maintain spiritual purity, political purity, mental discipline, because now the shaitan is manifested fighting me in my life, right? I have 3 shayateen that are trying to destroy my business, that are trying to destroy my community, right? This is an attack not on me. This is not an attack on me. This is an attack on our community here in Oakland, California. And it's an attack on our community in the diaspora. And it's an attack on our community in Palestine. It's an attack at our dignity, our humanity, and our right to vocalize that humanity. And the pretext for this attack is our embrace of our culture, right? Our embrace of the people for a moment, despite living 20, 30 years in prison, despite enduring torture, despite the heavy weight of dealing with an occupation, to just lift the finger, at the very least, lift the finger and to act upon for his people, right? Our embrace of that is what they want to demonize. The fact that someone would dare resist the occupation, right? The phrases that bring us joy, the phrases that bring us fire and catalyze us towards action, they want to demonize. This is the pretext. The pretext is the iced intifada. The pretext is the sweet sinwar. The pretext is the adornment of red triangles. The pretext is anything Palestinian, anything connected to Palestine. The pretext is Palestine. That's the pretext for all these lawsuits. So, I don't. This is just a disclaimer. Like, this is Jerusalem Coffee House is a loving place for everybody. I've I've been alive for 33 years. I'm born and raised in San Francisco. Um, I have love and care for everyone that wants to reciprocate that type of humanity and that type of dignity. The moment the moment you feel that you can impose your violence, whether it's veiled, whether your violence is veiled or you distort your violence so other people can't see it, I can respond to it because I have a history. I have a history that I have to honor. I have a history where I have to honor when someone wants to impose violence upon me. I'm not going to allow that to happen, not only upon me, but in the space and upon my customers, upon my staff. I won't allow it. If there's violence, if there's disruption, we won't allow it. And that's really what it was. I can't speak too much about the case, but no one was denied service. Everyone that wanted to buy a coffee bought a coffee. And everyone that wanted to antagonize customers and glare at customers and take up space and disrupt the business were treated accordingly. And since then, we've had multiple disruptions. Someone came in, um, antagonizing customers, flipping them off, spitting on the floor. Someone came in, spilled a hot Americano on me. People have come and have uh, like put up like wheat pasted pictures of dead children on our windows. And our windows are we have like pretty big windows in the front of the cafe. Those All those windows were covered with dead children. Our locks were sabotaged. Our you know, but we're not sitting out here telling people like, oh, woe is us, we're getting vandalized or this. We're responding adequately. We're responding by fortifying our community. We're responding by engaging in the political discourse that we need to in order to educate our community. And we're responding by litigating these cases and fighting these cases. And this is the only time I'll plug it because I hate doing this, but there is a GoFundMe. And um, and as I said, that this case, one of the injunctions that the Brandeis Center. So there's three cases, right? There's a state case that's filed by the Brandeis Center. There's a federal case filed by the ADL, two of the biggest Zionist think tanks in America, and you can argue in the world. And lastly, in an unprecedented action, there's an injunction filed on behalf of the DOJ. Um, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the law. This is almost unprecedented for the DOJ to get involved in a suit like this. Oftentimes, people lobby multiple presidents. So I'm talking about like three presidents. So that's 12 years. People spend lobbying the DOJ to get involved in a case, right? And this happened, as soon as the ADL, Mr. Greenblatt, went to go visit Trump. And then you had Pam Bondi at the White House press conference, right, where she talked about the cafe, and she provided the pretext in her speech, right? She didn't talk about any discrimination. She talked about the pretext of being Palestinian. She talked about Intifada. She talked about Sweet Sinwar. She talked about the same thing that we were doxxed for, right, by Andy No, right, a right wing writer out in London. This is how this all initially started. My menu was leaked online, and then it got doxxed, and then a local writer here that writes for like a Zionist publication picked it up, and that's how this all really started. So it shows you even the nefarious roots of these attacks, right? They're stemmed from a deep, programmed, right-winged racist ideology.
It's fascism. Yeah, they're fascists.
Yeah, Andy, you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I know who you're talking about.
I wasn't familiar with him up until this moment.
Oh, yeah. I remember him from 2020 during the George Floyd uprisings when he outed himself as a fascist and was openly, salivating at the videos of protesters, myself included, being beaten by the LAPD and the LA Sheriff's Department. And what I'll say about your cafe is you protected community. You protected your community, right? You had an agitator come in and try and disrupt your community, and you kept the space safe, which is a quintessential part of building community. If a space cannot be maintained and its safety, then it cannot be used as a hub of organizing, right? And so I also had the honor of visiting your cafe. I was in the Bay doing shows probably like a couple weeks ago, and it was lovely. It's an amazing cafe. The vibes are immaculate. The like decorations are fantastic. Literally everything from like when you even walk around the block and see the huge mural, right? From the parking lot. Like all the way up until you have a drink, which is delicious. Like everything about the cafe was so great. And so I can only imagine that somebody would have a bad time if they went there to have a bad time, right? If your job is to disrupt and agitate, then it's very likely that that's what's going to happen. And the person who is involved at the center of this case has a history of disruption and agitation.
I said I'm happy that you got to come and experience the cafe, and it was a. I'm unfortunate that I've missed you, but hopefully you guys can
Yeah.
both come back and visit us again soon.
Yes, absolutely. It was, I mean, it's truly lovely. And it was like so heartwarming to see people, the community in there, right? There were people talking about how to best advocate for Palestine. There were people who were connecting and talking about, revolutionaries like Che Guevara. And you even have a literature, like a library there for people to read and to engage in political discussion. And what you said as well about political purity. Like I super respect that because you get a lot of like watered down versions of like the Palestinian struggle, but that was not the case. To a T, everything that the Palestinian struggle stands for, it's anti-capitalist, it's anti-colonial, it's anti-racist, it's, multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multi-racial. It's truly the intersectionality that you don't often see um when Palestine is discussed. And so what I'll say about this guy, oh sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Alhamdulillah, all that is from Allah, and all that is just a reflection of the community. And I think
Yeah.
that's something and that's what truly angers the Zionists is the fact that
Mhm.
this community can exist and blossom and flourish so beautifully when it's so antithetical to who they are. And
Yeah.
that's really that's the tension for them.
George Jackson, field marshal of the Black Panther Party, said, "I am a blade in the throat of fascism." And that's what your cafe feels like, right? Your cafe is not convenient for them. And so, yeah, what I'll just read about this agitator who came into your business trying to disrupt, your cafe. He has done contract work for Apple and Airbnb and is no stranger to conflict and controversy. His LinkedIn appears to have been deleted after publication. In at least 3 other incidents dating back to last November, he has engaged in loud public arguments with strangers, with issues at dispute including Israel and Palestine, local politics, and his own driving. I thought that was funny. Some of these incidents were recorded by the other party, some by Hirsch himself. In several, they took place in front of one or more of his young children. At least one encounter besides the cafe incident resulted in a call to the police. So this person has a history of being an agitator and disrupting spaces. And then they launch, we know that Zionists have a lawfare project because they have a podcast called the Lawfare Podcast where they talk about their strategy, where they sue people and entities into oblivion so as to exhaust their funds, bankrupt them, ruin their families. This happened to a friend of mine, Kim Food Benders in Toronto. Her business was attacked. She had to sell it. She had to, basically uproot her entire life because of the lawfare that the Zionists engaged in. And so they do this lawfare strategy through a variety of, Zionist think tanks, the Brandeis Center and the ADL being the most prominent of them. And so, yeah, as you said, you are caught up in something that is so much larger than just you and this agitator who visited your cafe. They're connected, right? They, like the Zionists, their plans, their conspiracies, they're all connected, right? They're all working to support one another. And so, like, their Hasbara is one aspect. That's their informational warfare arm, their lawfare project, right? That's where they sue everybody into oblivion and exhaust you through legal fees. And then they have their military arm, which is committing the genocide against the people on the ground, right? And so it's this multi-pronged strategy that the Zionists engaged in. And yeah, you're caught up in the middle of it.
Yeah,
And when you are engaged in a genocide that has been live streamed, and when the people who are committing that genocide are identifying with this symbol, right, and they're carving the symbol into people's faces, they are carving it into the land. The symbol itself becomes emblematic of the fascism, right? And so anybody who is subjected, who is the victim of this fascism, has the right to reject this symbol.
we have a right to reject any type of political violence that is being imposed upon us. We
Of
have a
course.
right to reject it, point blank, period. As a Palestinian, I have a right to reject it. And also, as a Palestinian, it's not my job to go ahead and educate people on why I rejected it. When we had our press conference here at the end of July, I believe it was July 26th, had a comrade from IJAN speak, and they spoke precisely about exactly what you're talking about the fear that they get when they see one as well, about the way that it has been branded, and the way that the planes, the war planes that are dropping bombs and ammunition, what they're plastered with, right? And this is, if for a second, if we want to, in good faith, we want to assume in good faith that people truly want peace, then this is something that they have to address and something they have to engage with, because unfortunately, what Zionism has done to the Jewish faith is co-opt it and use it as fodder to continue its colonial violence and its genocide upon Palestinian people. The same way that Christopher Columbus used Christianity and Manifest Destiny, right, to impose slavery, right, and genocide and subjugation upon natives and black Africans. It's the same way that Zionists are using Judaism to impose violence upon Palestinians. Uh, I can say I reject these types of political impositions, right? And it's not my job to educate people as to why, right?
We also have to sit with the irony that a Zionist got upset that they were kicked out of somewhere, right? Like, Zionists, known for kicking people out of places, gets upset that he was asked politely to leave. Yeah, well, they're compulsive liars. Everything they've ever done is made up, right? And so even in this lawfare case, like, they're making a ton of shit up. And they're just hoping it'll stick. And even if it doesn't, they know that just like the process alone is exhausting for you. And it's going to be a trial and a tribulation that takes like a lot of mental and also economic toll on your life. And so that's really the goal ultimately, is to exhaust you and to get you to break away from your faith, from your steadfastness, your sumut, right? Like, to like distract you and to break you off that path. But I can tell just by talking to you that they picked the wrong guy.
Man, it's alhamdulillah. I hope that that this trial could bring me closer to Allah through this. Like I mentioned, like spiritual purity and mental discipline. So through this, I've been have been like purifying myself, and because I need to be disciplined and more present if I'm engaging these people in this matter, especially it's like a chess game and they got queens, nothing but queens. And I just, like we're building everything from scratch, right? Our PR, our comms, the litigation strategy. It's been really overwhelming trying to run the business, build a community, and litigate these cases. But like, alhamdulillah for everything. This is the position that you know you've been put in, and at least I can do this without threat of death, without threat of a drone, without threat of a bomb, without threat of rape. I can fight. I can fight on behalf of my people without dying. Imagine the privilege in that, the privilege in being able to at one day, inshallah, like you have a dignified death, a death that is not sudden, is not tragic, doesn't tear holes in the hearts of your family and your loved ones. Palestinians aren't experiencing that today, right? Death has become like a very, it's emotional, and it's deafening to your soul, to your spirit.
What's refreshing is you're moving like a true revolutionary, bro.
Alhamdulillah. We all empower each other,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why our community is like super important.
Absolutely.
We started this talking about community, and I think we should end it talking about community. I think that's a great place
Yeah.
to end. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights with us, and hopefully inspiring all of us to create more community where we are, and to understand the value and the strength of that. And we wish you the best of luck and solidarity with the outcome of these cases and everything you do going forward.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair. May Allah bless you guys. Thank you for having me on. It's a deep honor. I'm grateful to have met y'all. I heard a lot of great things about you guys from comrades that you guys are probably both familiar with. So also el cafe tabauku. So cafe. So come here. You guys are welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Shukran.
Yeah.